summit is completely different, because since Cancun we've actually managed to agree to a global treaty by 2015. That's a million miles away from where we were when we convened in Cancun. What's that? 3 years ago. 2 years ago, in the aftermath of Copenhagen, which was a sort of car crash in terms of the outcome for climate politics. The fact now that we have this commitment to commit by 2015 is incredibly significant, but it's only a commitment to commit. There's still a lot of work to do to ensure that we end up with a global treaty that will actually deliver lower temperatures. And the fact of the matter is, we've got a lot of work to do. We need to leave Doha, not just with a sense of momentum, but actually with a very credible work plan that will mean that we can actually achieve those milestones to 2015. Because what we can't do, what happened at Copenhagen, was leave it all to the last minute, cross our fingers and hope that political leaders can just arrive in the last couple of days and sew up a comprehensive global treaty. The agenda is far too complex, there are far too many work streams, there are many, many different factors. So it does require officials to really engage now and think as they negotiate at Doha, is what I'm agreeing to today, or is what I'm objecting to today, really going to help us agree an ambitious treaty in 2015? And that for me is the litmus test.
In terms of the Kyoto Protocol, that's clearly one of these sort of milestones you've been talking about. How can the UK, what role is the UK going to play in increasing the ambition of what is at the moment a not very ambitious treaty?
Well, the important thing is that we get the KP2, that we leave Doha with a second commitment period that runs all the way to 2020. That's the first thing. But in agreeing to 2020, we're not locking down ambition. We need to make sure that there is a mechanism within the KP2 to review ambition. Now, the UK has been arguing for a higher level of ambition, raising the 20% target to 30% for some time now. Now, we'll only do that when we reach consensus, and the reality is we don't yet have consensus within the EU. But it is a work in progress. I began talking to European partners about raising our level of ambition, nearly 2 years ago now. And we have made progress. There is a greater consensus. There is a greater acceptance that actually, far from damaging our economy, in many ways it could help reinforce European competitiveness. But that argument hasn't been seen through to completion yet. There are still concerns on some of the key European partners, but I think we will overcome those concerns, certainly well before 2020, well before 2020, but we're not going to do it here at Doha. So I think the important thing is to future-proof KP2 so it does allow for the EU in due course to raise ambition.
And in terms of some of those partners you talked about, AOSIS, Alliance of Small Island States, were one of those key coalition partners that you worked with in Durban. From your talks with them yesterday and today, do you feel they are happier with the package that is on offer? Because there have been a number of press releases they've been releasing saying simply not good enough.
Well, I think what they're concerned about is that a KP2 that runs to 2020 locks out ambition. And I think we need to do more in the EU to convey to partners like OASIS that we're not ruling out raising ambition. That's absolutely critical. We will be driven by the science. We do want to be able to raise ambition in due course. But we also need to work together more constructively. The reason that we got such a good outcome at Durban was because groups like OASIS, like the least developed countries, the Africa group, and the EU really worked together constructively, built a new consensus. And we need to see that shared level of ambition, that commitment to working together here at Doha, if we're to repeat the good outcomes that we finally managed to secure, perhaps against the odds, at Durban last year.
Okay, a couple more questions. One is on the loss and damage discussions. You talked about it briefly in the press conference. Do you think there is any political will at all amongst developed countries to entertain a loss and damage mechanism which would ensure poorer countries were compensated for climate disasters?
I think one has to look at this in the overall context of carbon pollution and an evolving economy. As I said in the press conference earlier, this is a moving target. we're very soon past the point at which all of the cumulative emissions from developed countries since the Industrial Revolution will be surpassed by the massive increase in output from developing countries. So it's really very difficult and potentially dangerous to get into exact attribution of blame and apportioning responsibility for damage. I think what is better is to say in Europe, certainly in the UK, we recognise that developed countries, developed economies have an historic responsibility. We started this whole ball game that has ended in man-made global warming, but I think trying to parcel it up like that is not necessarily very helpful. But that's not to say that we don't have clear responsibilities. We certainly want to engage in discussion about equity and fairness, and that's important that we do. But I'm a little suspicious of parceling it up in that way.
Okay, and a final point, going back to the sort of idea of political will, which seems to be to an extent absent from these talks. What more could civil society pressure groups do to push not just your government but all governments around the world towards a deal? What do you need? What do you need to see from a politician's point of view to actually be able to push the ambition?
Well, firstly, stay engaged. The fact of the matter is there are fewer NGOs here, there are fewer activists here at the COP than have been the case in previous years. Now, in itself, that's not a problem, but if that is symptomatic of a broader disengagement, that is worrying. And I think, for those NGOs who are looking to allocate their resources into other environmental campaigns, to divert their funding streams into other issues, I would just say, think again. The climate science is telling us the problem is more urgent and pressing than ever. We need to maintain the momentum. Governments of all colours and shades need to be reminded that this is an urgent issue right the way around the world, and the NGOs play a critical role in keeping governments honest on this agenda.
Are you confident that governments do listen to NGOs?
Absolutely. I know that they do. I know that they do, particularly when they're able to mobilise the electorate at such a scale as we've seen in the past. But the NGOs mustn't drift away from this issue just because other parties are drifting away. We need them to stay here.